Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Good morning, honorable members. As we begin our devotions with our Moments of Impact segment, I would like to share on this thought today, the power of unity. There's a portion of scripture I'd like to read in your hearing. That's taken from Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 to 7. And it reads, "And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar. And they said, Let us build a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men built. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one. They have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do." This story perfectly illustrates the power of unity and what can be accomplished when we come together as one. During this time in history when this story was recorded, the people had one language and they were of one speech. They came together and devised a plan to build a city and a tower to reach the heavens. As they progressed in their plans as a result of their united efforts, they got God's attention. And God's response was this: Behold, the people are one. They have one language, and nothing shall be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. The moral of this biblical story is that when people come together for one common cause, nothing they imagine to do will be impossible for them to achieve. They will be unstoppable. The lesson in this for us as a nation is that we must not be divided amongst ourselves, because a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. Therefore, we must come together as Bahamians, the black, the white, the rich, the poor, the PLP, the FNM, and all of the other political parties, churches, civic organizations, and wage warfare against crime, against poverty, against homelessness, against unemployment, against sickness and disease, against corruption, against drug abuse, and the social ills that our country is faced with. If we bind our efforts as a people, absolutely nothing will be impossible for us to accomplish. In my concluding thoughts, let's put aside our differences, our selfish ambitions. Let us work together for the common good of all, because the reality is, what affects one affects all of us. As penned in our national anthem, let us pledge to excel through love and unity, and let us press onward and march together to a common, loftier goal. Selah, think and act on these things. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we praise and thank you for your goodness towards us. We thank you, Lord, for sparing our lives to see yet another day. We pray today for unity within our country. We pray against the spirit of strife and division that seek to separate and stagnate us from making progress. We pray, oh God, that as a people we would join forces as a united army and defeat the enemies that we are facing. Lord, help us to understand that a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. And so, Father, today we ask that you would bind us together with cords that cannot be broken. Today, as these honorable members have gathered today to discuss the business of this your people, we invite your presence to be amongst us. Holy Spirit, we ask that you would take full control of each of these mortal vessels. And may the spirit of unity and togetherness speak louder than their differences and opinions. We thank you in advance today for great success as we seek to build a robust and prosperous nation. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Let us repeat the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Philip Davis, Chester Cooper, Fred Mitchell, Glennis Hannah Martin, Obadiah Wilstom, Alfred Sears, Dr. Michael Darville, Clay Sweeting, Keith Bell, Wayne Monroe, Vaughn Miller, Jobeth Colby Davis, Ginger Moxie, Mario Boleg, Jomo Campbell, Basil McIntosh, Miles LaRoda, Pia Glover Roll, Lisa Ramming, Zane Lightborn, Dr. Hubert Minnis, Jamal Strawn, John Pinder, Marcus Roll, Leon Lundy, Kirk Cornish, Wade Watson, Leonardo Lightborn, Leslia Miller Bryce, Leroy Major, Sylvanius Petty, Mikel Bonnaby, Michael Pintard, James Quasey Thompson, Aram Lewis, Shannon Don Cartwright, Adrian Gibson, Adrian White.
Good morning, everyone. Honorable members, I have several reports from the Auditor General, which will lay on the table at this time. Audit examinations of accounts of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Bahamas Consulate General Office, Atlanta, Georgia, for the period of July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2022. The audit of the Bahamas High Commission, London, for the period of July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2022. The audit examination of the accounts of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Bahamas Permanent Mission, Geneva, for the period of July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2022. The audit examination of the accounts of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Bahamas Embassy in Brussels, Belgium, for the period of November 1st, 2018 to July 7, 2022. Audit of accounts of the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute for the periods of July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2019 to July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020. The audit of the accounts of the Department of Meteorology for the fiscal period July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2019. To July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020. And July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. The audit examination of the accounts of the Post Office in San Salvador and Rumkey for the period of January 1st, 2020 to October 30th, 2021. The audit examinations of the accounts of the Post Office in Nicholstown, Andros for the period of July 1st, 2018 to April 14, 2021. The audit report, Nicholstown District for the periods of July 2018 to June 2019, July 2019 to June 2022, July 2020 to February 2021. Order that the documents to lie on the table. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I wish to beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Price Control Drugs Amendment Regulations 2022.
Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents to lie on the table. Further tabling of documents.
Mr. Deputy, I wish to lay on the table the Price Control Application to Additional Items Regulations 2022.
Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents to lie on the table. Further tabling of documents.
Mr. Deputy, I wish to lay on the table the Public Holidays National Heroes Day 2022, Opening of Shops Notice 2022.
Order that documents be brought up. Order that the documents to lie on the table. Further tabling of documents. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Centerville.
No. Documents. Order.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael.
To lay on the table a copy of the following: the minimum wages increase in minimum wages order 2022.
Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents to lie on the table. Further tabling of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Morning, Mr. Deputy. I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Police Force Declaration of Neighboring Territory, Turks and Caicos Islands Order 2022.
Order that the documents be brought up.
The fronting page of this, there should be a fronting page to it. Okay.
Same thing, just sign it. Yeah.
Order that the documents to lie on the table. Further tabling of documents by ministers.
Documents.
Statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Honorable members, good morning. I wish to begin by thanking our Almighty God for allowing me this opportunity, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to stand in this honorable place once again on behalf of the great people of Carmichael who supported my candidacy and sent me here to implement the mandate of the Progressive Liberal Party. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg your indulgence for a moment. I wish to indicate that at this moment, the Ministry of Labor and Immigration, the Department of Labor and Immigration, is laying to rest Mr. Anthony Michael Williams, who served with distinction for more than 30 years. He also served as the Vice Consul to Haiti And in that context, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would ask if we could observe a moment of silence on his behalf. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, central to the mandate given by the electorate in electing a progressive Liberal Party government was the assurance that if elected, a progressive Liberal Party government would govern in ways consistent with our core values. The Progressive Liberal Party, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is committed to nation building, championing the cause of a people who dream, who desire, who are determined to better the lives of the generations that follow. This, Mr. Deputy Speaker, requires governance which remains committed to assisting the poor, comforting the sick, helping the downtrodden, guiding the youth, and bringing peace to the hearts of all in our nation. These must not just be words, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but must also be matched in our deeds that seek to meet the needs of our people. Mr. Deputy Speaker, last week, during his national address, our Honorable Prime Minister reaffirmed the commitment of the Progressive Liberal Party to implement the promised and needed reforms in governance to build a better Bahamas more suitable for the advancement and empowerment of our country and Bahamians. This is the mandate, Mr. Deputy Speaker, upon which we were elected, and this is the mandate by which, by God's grace and mercy, and with an able leader, we will implement. As members would recall, last week, Mr. Deputy Speaker, our Honorable Prime Minister advised that the necessary order will soon be brought to Parliament, seeking the approval of members of this Honorable House to increase the minimum wage from the rate of $210 per week to $260 per week, in keeping with our promise to the Bahamian people.
Yes.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, whilst it is our intention to table the order shortly, I wish to give this brief communication to apprise members and the Bahamian people of the rationale and steps taken to arrive at this point. But before I do, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to acknowledge the presence of the National Tripartite Council, which is headed by Ms. Sharon Martin, and the members present this morning, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of course, is the chairman, Ms. Martin, Mr. Quinton LaRoda, Ms. Sherry Benjamin, Ms. Malvise Capron, Ms. Rayonda Cadet, and Ms. Jellies Ferguson. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thought I had energy. Anybody who knows Ms. Martin and the team know that she has the energy beyond.
Yes.
And I wish to commend her and each member for the fine work they have done.
Yes.
I continue to pray for each of them as they continue to chart and lead the way in labor relations in this country, as we continue to lead the world and the region and our country decent work program. So I commend each of you and I thank you on behalf of the Bahamian people. Mr. Deputy Speaker, on the 21st of January 2002, the Minimum Wage Act, introduced by the Free National Movement, took effect. The Minimum Wage Act represented a fundamental shift in workplace relations, as it marked one of the most significant interventions by the government of the Bahamas into the labor market by setting a minimum rate for labor. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the act had noteworthy detractors from the start. Indeed, some claimed that the introduction of the act was an unnecessary governmental interference with the free labor market. Some went on to claim that the then minimum wage of $30 for an 8-hour day was too much and it would destroy the job market. History will record who was right. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have chosen to begin by speaking about the passage of the act, as I believe that it is appropriate and important for me to state here that the government led by the Right Honorable Hubert Ingram made the right decision by implementing the Minimum Wage Act. Mr. Deputy Speaker, they made the right decision when they stood up against those within their own party and in the country who argued that there should be no minimum standard as to what a worker should be paid for their labor. Mr. Deputy Speaker, if it is to be agreed that the government was right to pass the act when it did, it must also follow that from time to time, the rate must be adjusted to account for the increased cost of living in our country. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I believe the passage of the act by the party opposite was the right thing to do. And I also firmly believe that adjusting the wage to account for the increased cost of goods and services is the right thing to do now. Mr. Deputy Speaker, January of this year marked the 20th year of the implementation of the act. 20 years, 2 decades. During the time which has followed, the wage has been amended only once, and by the Progressive Liberal Party in 2015, 13 years after implementation. One single increase in 20 years. Mr. Deputy Speaker, what is also noteworthy is that whilst the Minimum Wage Act was implemented under the FNM, in the decades which have followed, their support for increasing the wage appears to have shifted. Mr. Deputy Speaker, prior to the general elections of 2021, the Progressive Liberal Party promised in our blueprint for change that we will rescue the most vulnerable and discouraged in our society. We in the Progressive Liberal Party, Mr. Deputy Speaker, also recognized that the cost of living is well beyond the means of middle and low income Bahamians. Therefore, we committed, and we put it in writing, to review minimum wage to phase in a livable wage, and secondly, recommend to the National Tripartite Council that they move towards a minimum wage of $250 per week. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these were not hidden commitments, but rather a promise made to the voters who elected us. I submit that elections must have consequences, and governments must ensure that they implement the mandate given by the electorate in a way which is sound and responsible, which we have done in this case.
Yes.
At its core, Mr. Deputy Speaker, having regard to all the circumstances, the government is proposing an increase to the minimum wage because it is the right thing to do. I advise this House, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this proposal was thoroughly reviewed and studied and follows significant deliberations. The National Tripartite Council conducted a period of research that included discussions and collaboration with local, regional, and international partners to gather data and relevant information before considering a final recommendation on an increase to the minimum wage to put before the government. Mr. Deputy Speaker, comments from the International Labour Organization, trade unions, and employer representatives, data from government agencies, and the University of the Bahamas, and members of the private sector were all debated and considered. The Legal Advisory Committee of the NTC presented their report to Cabinet in a detailed, and I must say, very impressive presentation, complete with all relevant data and supporting and dissenting arguments. Notably, while the social partners all agree that there is an urgent need to review the national minimum wage, in the end, they were unable to arrive at a consensus on what the new national wage should be. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it should not come as a surprise that stakeholders were not able to agree on a proposed minimum wage. Some employers believe that $210 is adequate and should not be increased. There are a few other employers who are opposed to any minimum standard. They advocate for the good old days of paying workers whatever rate they determine. In relation to employees faced with highest inflation rates in recent times, arguments were made significantly in respect for higher pay. Mr. Deputy Speaker, whilst there may be many diverging views, there are a few facts that must be considered. For instance, between the passage of the Act in 2002 and today, there has been a general increase in prices and fall in the purchasing value of money. This is what we call inflation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, if we consider the period between the last increase to the wage by the Progressive Liberal Party in 2015 and now, it is noted that in the first 6 months of this year alone, the Department of Statistics reported an inflation rate of 6.6%, the highest rate we have seen in recent times. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the final analysis, the government weighed the balance and concluded that we must move to protect workers against unduly low pay and help to ensure a just and equitable share of the fruits of their labor. Yes. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in making this determination, the government is mindful of the International Labour Organization's Convention on Minimum Wage Fixing Convention number 131, which provides, minimum wages shall have the force of law and shall not be subject to abatement, and failure to apply them shall make the person or persons concerned liable to appropriate penal or other sanctions. Article 3 of the convention goes on to say, the elements to be taken into consideration in determining the level of minimum wages shall, far as possible and appropriate in relation to national practice and conditions, include A, the needs of workers and their families, taking into account the general level of wages in the country, the cost of living, social security benefits, and the relative living standards of other social groups. B, economic factors, including the requirements of economic development, levels of productivity, and the desirability of attaining and maintaining a high level of employment. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we in the Progressive Liberal Party support the principles outlined in Article 2 and 3 of the ILO's Convention 131 on minimum wages, as it recognizes the need to balance competing interests to the benefit of all. Mr. Deputy Speaker, at this time, the government has determined that the minimum wage should be set at $260 per week, or $52 per day, or $6.50 per hour. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the past week, various arguments have been made from various sectors about the sum of $260. I wish to make it clear to persons who are employed, who work incredibly hard and cannot survive off the current wage of $210 per week. The government is not saying that you should only earn $260 or that the sum is adequate. No. Indeed, the government recognizes that the minimum wage must, in time, be transitioned into a wage that is appropriate for today's costs of living. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I do not believe that this statement can or is in fact controversial. In 2021, researchers of the University of the Bahamas published a report entitled A Living Wage for the Bahamas, Estimates, Potentials, and Problems. The report was authored by a number of persons, including Olivia Sanders, Brittany Johnson. Mr. Deputy Speaker, before speaking to their findings, I wish to publicly thank the authors of the report for the research and critical analysis which they applied to their research. The report describes how the living wage estimates were calculated for New Providence and Grand Bahama. This report uses primary and secondary sources and is inspired by the Anchor methodology. They calculated that $2,625 and $3,550, respectively, were needed each month as the gross living wage for a full-time worker who must sustain a family of 4 in New Providence and Grand Bahama. They estimated that the net living wage to be $2,500 per month for New Providence and $3,400 for Grand Bahama. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is notable that the report found estimates are almost 200% higher than the minimum wage and nearly 130% higher than the poverty line for New Providence. For Grand Bahama, it is almost 300% higher than the minimum wage and 160% higher than the poverty line. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the authors went on to say that the studies should inform national discussions on public policy matters related to reducing the country's cost of living, improve its income inequity, and pursuing economic justice for all. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the report was viewed by some as unreasonable. However, in my view, it is hard to argue with the numbers. It is hard to challenge the methodology, and consequently, it is hard to dismiss the conclusions, nor should we. Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Silence your phones, please.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, whilst it is acceptable that it is not possible to move to a livable wage immediately, it is the view of this Davis-led Progressive Liberal Party government that it is a goal. We should seek to transition to a livable wage over time. Of course, and very importantly, I emphatically emphasize that the transition to a livable wage over time can only be sustained and implemented if there are corresponding increases in efficiency and productivity. On a national level, our overall labor productivity must increase, and it can only increase by us continuing to offer opportunities for workers to upgrade their skills and offer education and training. We must also work smarter and use more efficient technologies to assist us in being more productive in the workplace. Mr. Deputy Speaker, employees must be committed to carrying out their duties to a high standard to ensure the success of the businesses for which they are employed. These must go hand in hand. Mr. Deputy Speaker, for 2022, the labor force for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas stands at 214,600 persons. Although data is not current, I am advised that as much as 60,000 workers may be impacted by this increase, almost 25% of our workforce. They will be the recipients of the proposed increase. This is certainly good news in this new day. Mr. Deputy Speaker, of note, this past Saturday, October 15th, 2022, the Department of Labor hosted a Labor on the Blocks job fair in collaboration with Carmichael, South Beach, and Southern Shore communities. Some 45 employers participated in the fair seeking to hire persons. Also participating in the job fair to offer various training programs were the National Training Agency, the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute, the Lowell J. Mortimer Maritime Academy, and Cybertech Technology. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is to be noted that this initiative took place after the Honorable Prime Minister announced the pending increases to minimum wage, and after persons in some quarters opined that the increase would result in catastrophic job losses and business closures. Mr. Deputy Speaker, news of the jobs fair spread like wildfire. Pictures of scores of persons who turned out were circulated all over social media. As Minister of Labor, I am proud to announce the resounding success and the results of the job fair. It was nothing short of astounding and God's work in us. For example, a major hotel interviewed and hired a young lady on the spot and asked her to report to work at 2 p.m. on Saturday. Another hospitality participant hired 42 persons on the spot, and they began work on Monday gone. A local restaurant hired 44 persons on the spot, and they began work also on Monday gone. A luxury upscale retailer interviewed over 75 persons and identified 55 possible new staff pending background checks. Another restaurant group interviewed over 60 persons and identified 40 persons expected to be hired this week. A hardware store interviewed 44 persons, hired 2 persons on the spot, and expected to hire the others during the course of this week. And an automotive part retailer interviewed 7 persons, hired 3 persons on the spot, and of course will hire the others. On behalf of a thankful government, people, a department, the Director of Labor, Ministry, and my Permanent Secretary, I extend my sincerest gratitude to all the employers who came out and carried out their civic duties very professionally, very organized, very disciplined. I invite all members of Parliament to partner with the Department of Labor and take full advantage of labor on the blocks. We are prepared to come to you in your constituency as we work together to uplift and inspire our people. It is indeed a new day. Yes. Mr. Deputy Speaker, governance requires a balancing act between the various competing interests. I believe that we have struck a satisfactory balance having regard to all the circumstances. In the end, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to thank the Honorable Prime Minister for the confidence he has shown in me as Minister with responsibility for labor and immigration, and his compassion and passion for ensuring that we bring much needed reforms and relief to our people. May God continue to bless our Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents to lie on the table. Further communications by ministers.
Communications.
Communication by the clerk. Message from the Governor General. Message from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Presentations of petitions. Presentations of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fox Hill.
Some things in your name, Mary. Okay. Sorry. Beg leave to introduce, Mr. Speaker, and have read for the first time a copy of the following: a bill for an act to amend the Value Tax Act. Second?
Second.
Order that the bill be brought up. Order that the documents to lie on the table. It's been moved and seconded that the following bill be read the first time. Which one? Which one it is? A bill for an act to amend the Value Added Tax Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. We order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Value Added Tax Act.
Okay. For the first reading of bills. Okay.
Good morning.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Centerville.
Good morning, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following: a bill for an act to repeal and replace the Law Reform and Revision Act and to modernize the law for reforming, revising, and consolidating the laws of the Bahamas and for connected purposes.
Is there a seconder? Okay. Order that the bill be brought up. It's been moved and seconded that the following bill be read the first time. A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Law Reform and Revision Act and to modernize the law for reforming, revising, and consolidating the laws of the Bahamas and for connected purposes. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read the first time.
A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Law Reform and Revision Act and to modernize the law for reforming, revising, and consolidating the laws of the Bahamas and for connected purposes. Okay.
For the first reading of bills. Second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Centerville.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave for an amendment to be made to clause 4. My apologies, Mr. Speaker. Got a bit ahead of myself.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am honored once again to stand in this place on behalf of the people of the great constituency of Centerville. I am grateful to them for the confidence that they have reposed in me to represent them here in this honorable place. Though many have occupied this august chamber and have had this special opportunity to represent citizens over the past 293 years, many more still have tried and failed, some on numerous occasions. This is just one of the many reasons why those of us who have made it to this place must understand how important it is and recognize that we are not only a part of a rich history, but that the people we represent depend heavily on us to be and do what we promise to get their vote. Yes. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as the Member of Parliament for Centerville, I am doing my best to ensure that I can assist residents whenever and however I can. Since I last stood in this place, much has happened in Centerville. We had an extremely successful back-to-school launch in which we were able to provide some 1,500 plus students with back-to-school care packages, with the hopes that this would assist them in having a successful school year. We were also able to successfully launch, with the help of the Honorable Member for Bain and Grantstown, Wi-Fi on the park, the second Wi-Fi on the park, on Centerville Park, to ensure that our young ones and all of our constituents can use these parks for the reasons in which they were created. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I also at this time would wish to thank the Honorable Member for Golden Isles who walked with me through the Royal Avenue and Peach Street area as we embarked on the cleanup campaign in the Centerville constituency, beginning with the removal of derelict vehicles. I would also at this time like to thank the Member of Parliament from Fort Charlotte and South Beach and their team at the Ministry of Works for assisting us in our road paving efforts in the very same areas. Constituents are now bragging of how they are no longer spilling tea and coffee on themselves due to potholes and bumps in that particular road. And I can say that with the help of God and that team, more paving is yet to come. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I cannot congratulate all of my colleagues and forget to congratulate my colleague right beside me, the member for Pinewood, and his team at ZNS that just celebrated their anniversary. This is important to us, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because ZNS is also a part of the Centerville family, residing on top of the hill, Collins Avenue. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as life would have it, we have our ups and downs. And in Centerville, over the past few weeks and months, we have had some downs in the representation of persons passing on. Far too many to call at this particular time, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And with that being said, I wish to extend a heartfelt condolence to each and every family that has suffered the loss of a loved one. On the flip side, Mr. Deputy Speaker, whilst we know that death is inevitable, we also have to take the time to celebrate life. And I, at this juncture, Mr. Deputy Speaker, would wish to say a very happy belated birthday to my wife, who celebrated for the 20th time her 21st birthday yesterday. And to my aunt, who celebrates her birthday today. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm not a clairvoyant, but if the Lord willing, my father will celebrate his birthday on Saturday. And so I wish to take this opportunity to congratulate all of them. Indeed, it has been. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this past September 16th has marked 1 year since the Progressive Liberal Party won the last general elections held in our country. I want to take this opportunity to congratulate my colleagues in this place on both sides of the aisle. I understand now fully that running for public office is not an easy or inexpensive endeavor. I also understand that there are some people in the electorate who did not vote for the PLP and some who did not vote at all for whatever reason. It is now the job of this administration to persuade the majority of those who will be eligible to vote in the next election that we are worthy of retaining power. Yes. I have said before, and I will say it again, I firmly believe that the Progressive Liberal Party is the best choice. This, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the party of achievement, of legacy, of clarity, of purpose, and philosophy. We are who all others follow. We are who all others try to emulate. And we are who the people look to when others fail. In this past year, the Bahamas has faced many challenges, some domestic and some due to international occurrences. When we came to office, COVID-19 was raging. Now we are maskless. Our children are back in school. Adults are back to work full time. Investors are back. Regattas are back, Marco City. Festivals. And guess what, St. Barnabas? Junkanoo is back. Boat parades. Indeed. We're also seeing tourists flock to our country in record numbers. However, amongst all the good news that we can tout, there is still some bad. We are currently in a battle against inflation, high energy and fuel prices, immigration, and crime. The Bahamian people can be assured that this administration, under the leadership of the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, is seeking to bring remedy to each of those issues. Mr. Deputy Speaker, considering the depth of the hole which we met, enough to climb our way out of, we have done well in 1 year. The next 4 years must be about ensuring that not only do we meet the needs of our people, but that we change the paradigm for as many families as possible. I believe that the new public procurement legislation will assist us in doing that. The new food items added to the price control schedule will also help. The rise in minimum wage is also a step in the right direction. At this juncture, I think it is appropriate that the naysayers understand that a step in the right direction is far better than a giant leap heading in the wrong direction. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Bahamas is considered a small country, but we have a history of doing big things on the world stage. Just as the Right Honorable Sir Lyndon Pinling had the fortitude to say, "I have come to look for America," in a time when South Africa was facing apartheid. So does our present Prime Minister and member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, the Honorable Philip Davis, seek to draw global attention to the plight of our country and others in the fight to mitigate the effects of climate change and the enormous loss and damage we face because of it. It is a fight that is imperative to our survival. And it is a fight, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we must win. There is no doubt that this administration, though not perfect, is on the right path. Our post-COVID-19 mandate is great. Much is expected of us, not only because of the state of our country, but for the mere fact that this is a progressive Liberal Party administration. We cannot let our people down. We must touch every life that we can. The status quo and mediocrity is no longer welcomed here. We must bring the Bahamas back to its glory days of excellence, productivity, national pride, and international prominence. Bahamians can rest assured this progressive Liberal Party will step into new frontiers solid as a rock. We will deliver help and hope because we still believe in the Bahamas in this new day. Yes. Mr. Deputy Speaker, according to the Central Bank, the financial services sector accounts for approximately 10 to 15% of the country's gross domestic product, the second largest contributor to our economy. The sector employs a substantial number of highly skilled workers and has direct effect on both employment and spending, while indirectly impacting other sectors such as construction, real estate, wholesale, and retail trade. Because of the international interdependence of the financial sector service, it faces continuously changing international regulations, which must be adhered to in order for participants, such as the Bahamas, to have the pleasure of doing business with the requisite preferable ratings and comply with best practices. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to place on the record of this place the current standard of the Bahamas with 3 regulatory organizations, namely the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, and the European Union, the EU. The OECD in 2016, under the previous PLP administration, the Bahamas committed to the automatic exchange of information under the Common Reporting Standards, the CRS. That administration tabled and passed the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Act 2016. The Bahamas signed on to the CRS on December 15, 2017. The act was amended in 2017 and then again in 2019. Exchanges commenced in September of 2018, with the Bahamas being tasked with effective implementation and monitoring of the AEOI. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the domestic and international legal regime of various jurisdictions are reviewed by the Global Forum to ensure that they are complete and effective. A review was carried out spanning 2020 through 2021. This administration received a report regarding that review shortly after coming in office. The report stated that the Bahamas was in compliance in the effective and timely exchange of information. However, when it comes to the correct reporting of financial institutions, conduct, due diligence, and reporting procedures, the Bahamas was compliant in one area, but not in the other.
2020, 2021.
Yes. This is what led to our country being rated as non-compliant. The Bahamas has advocated to the OECD to have the review report reconsidered. Government officials, including the Minister of Economic Affairs and the Attorney General, who was present here today, attended the peer review presentation.
They all come to blame.
The findings of the report were not changed, but a strategy to fix deficiencies identified and was agreed upon. The Bahamas will seek to be re-examined next year, 2023. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the amendment bill before this place for consideration today makes further amendments to the 2016 legislation. This bill seeks to amend Section 2 of Number 37 of 2016 by inserting a new term and its definition. The term is designated supervisory authority. The definition for this purpose is the agency designated by law to monitor and to ensure compliance with the requirements of this act, and included the Central Bank of the Bahamas, the Securities Commission of the Bahamas, the Insurance Commission of the Bahamas, the Gaming Board, and the Compliance Commission. As part of the Bahamas domestic monitoring, and compliance mechanism for the financial services sector. The group of regulators in the industry, namely the Central Bank, the Securities Commission, the Insurance Commission, the Gaming Board, and the Compliance Commission, are responsible for ensuring that their registrants and/or licensees are complying with the relevant laws, the regulations that apply to them in order for the Bahamas to maintain international best practices and remain in compliance with these regulatory agencies and organizations. These local regulators currently have the legal authority to monitor the compliance of their registrant and/or licensees, among other things, by way of audit, computer and on-site examinations for anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism purposes pursuant to the provisions of the Financial Transaction Reporting Act and other relevant legislation. With the amendment and enactment of the new legislation, the regulators would now be vested with the authority to act on behalf of the Ministry of Finance to monitor the compliance of their registrants and/or licensees for the purpose of this act. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as it relates to the Financial Action Task Force 40 recommendations on anti-money laundering compliance, the FATF 40 recommendations are measures that countries should implement to tackle money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. The Bahamas is a founding member of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, the CFATF, and is currently a part of the steering group. Our country has been under increased monitoring since the adoption of its mutual evaluation report in 2017. In December 2021, the CFATF has re-rated the country in relation to recommendations 6, 7, 24, and 33 from partially compliant to largely compliant, and recommendations 19, 22, 26, 27, and 28 from partially compliant to compliant. Today, the Bahamas is compliant with 18 recommendations and largely compliant on 20 of them. Combined, they represent 38 out of the 40 FATF recommendations. The Bahamas reported to the CFATF on the action we have taken since its mutual evaluation and its fourth enhanced follow-up report, which addressed specifically our partial compliance rating on 2 recommendations. The first of which is recommendation 15, addressing virtual asset service providers, and recommendation 8, which addresses not-for-profit organizations. Reevaluation is planned for the CFATF plenary meeting scheduled for next month. We are optimistic that the Bahamas will be re-rated concerning recommendations 18 and 15, which would mean that we are compliant or largely compliant with the mentioned recommendations. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Act 2018, otherwise known as CESRA, was enacted on the 1st of January 2019. This legislation involves commercial entities engaged in certain activities to have economic substance in the country. The Bahamas was called upon to implement the requirements for economic substance. shortly after the last general elections, this administration was informed of deficiencies related to the implementation of the CESRA Act and the economic substance reporting that were found in the annual monitoring for 2019 and 2020. The monitoring is conducted by the Code of Conduct Group of the European Union. This administration, Mr. Deputy Speaker, worked diligently to ensure that our country was not blacklisted or placed on the list of non-cooperative jurisdictions. This nonetheless occurred because we were not able to address all of the deficiencies before the determination of our review in April this year. The government of the Bahamas is committed to resolving all issues as soon as practically possible and is seeking a redetermination on our status. It is incumbent upon this government, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to safeguard our economy, and a large part of our economy, as I indicated earlier, is the financial services sector. There are some who think that we should remove ourselves from within the purview of international ratings and regulatory organizations because of the blacklisting and non-compliance ratings. However, the Bahamas has no intention of taking on pariah status when it comes to international best practices and compliance. What is necessary, however, is for the administration of this day to ensure that we are doing what is necessary to maintain compliance, proper monitoring and reporting, etc., to remain in good standing. In this regard, a draft order has been prepared and will be executed shortly after the bill takes force. For its part, this administration is committed to doing what is necessary to maintain well-regarded relationships with the financial organizations in which we participate. Thus, from time to time, we bring legislation to this place, like the one before us today, which is meant to tweak current laws to bring them in line with what is needed to meet current standards. These are, as I call them, Mr. Deputy Speaker, housekeeping bills. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this administration is traversing every avenue to assist industry as a result of the non-compliance rating, including engaging EU countries to try to mitigate any adverse consequences. This brings to mind, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the words of Marcus Aurelius when he indicated that the impediment to action advances action, and what stands in the way becomes the way. Mr. Deputy Speaker, with that being said, I wish to assure the citizens of this great Commonwealth that their New Day administration is seeking to advance the way. May God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Is there a seconder? Is there a seconder?
Gladiator.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bain and Grantstown.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, honorable members of this House of Assembly, good morning. I rise on behalf of the wonderful people of Baines and Grantstown to second the debate on the Automatic Exchange of Information Amendments Bill 2022. I will forever be grateful and appreciative to serve as the Member of Parliament of Baines and Grantstown, the constituency in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas that I call home. Mr. Deputy, before I get into the meat of my debate, I would like to congratulate Ms. Janie Skawala on her new executive team of the Baines and Grantstown branch of the Progressive Liberal Party on winning the branch election in August 2022. I also express my thanks to the members of the outgoing executive team for the work that they did prior. They did well while in office, and they deserve commendation. Mr. Deputy, 1 year has passed since the Philip Davis administration has been elected to office to govern this country. And while I want to inform the Bahamian people of all of the good works that we have done in the Baines and Grantstown constituency in the last 12 months, I can only speak to a few of the projects and programs I am now charged with, because I'm now charged with the awesome responsibility to second this debate on a matter that is so pressing and has many Bahamians concerned. Mr. Deputy, we continue our Breakfast on the Park program, where we have served more than 800 persons in polling divisions 5 and 8 in the last 2 months. I want to thank the member for Fort Charlotte, who has assisted my constituency with repairing potholes in the road and cleaning the drainages through John Road and Scott Street in polling divisions 7 and 6, respectively. Mr. Deputy, I want to thank my colleagues, the member for Golden Gates and the member for Marathon, as they both extended their assistance to me and my constituency. The member for Golden Gates, Ms. Glover Rule, she assisted me in ensuring that my people are hired under the Ministry of Public Service Employment Empowerment Program. On the other hand, the member for Marathon, Ms. Rami, she also assisted me with ensuring that a number of small homes are now being repaired in my constituency, and I say thank you very much. Mr. Deputy, I also want to extend a heartfelt thank you to the member for Golden Isles, Minister Miller, for his assistance with the removal of bulk waste and derelict vehicles within the Baines and Grantstown constituency. But he's not off the hook yet. We look forward to continued partnership with his ministry when the constituency-wide cleanup campaign is launched. Mr. Deputy, I am pleased to report that I continue to meet with my constituents during our office hours every Tuesday from 4 p.m. at the Baines and Grantstown constituency's office and Family Center on Blue Hill Road. Thus far, in the last 12 months, I've met with and tried to assist more than 800 constituents during office hours since coming to office and being elected as the Member of Parliament for Baines and Grantstown. Lastly, on Saturday, the 15th of October at 6:30 p.m., we conducted our 4th Street meeting on Dumping Ground Corner. The meeting was well received, and we will now focus our attention on preparing for the 5th Street meeting in polling division number 5. Mr. Deputy, as it relates to the work under my portfolio, I must highlight the Bahamas Parks Connect project, where this administration was able to implement free Wi-Fi in at least one park in each constituency throughout the Bahamas, not just in St. Barnabas or Kalani, but yes, the entire Bahamas. I want to personally thank our partners, BTC, Alive and Cable, Bahamas Power and Light, and Electro Telecoms for their able assistance in ensuring that we were able to meet our deadline by the end of August 2022. Mr. Deputy, Mr. Darrell Miller said on his national talk show, and I quote, "Putting Wi-Fi on parks is the greatest single intervention in the Bahamas' history in the last 30 years. And I quote. And again, I didn't say it, he said it. We in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, the Department of Transformation and Digitization, the Digital Transformation Unit will continue to roll out significant technological solutions that will positively impact the lives and living conditions of Bahamians while seeking to improve the ease of doing business, not only with the government, but generally and at large. Mr. Deputy, this administration will continue to work on behalf of the Bahamian people and will continue to put the needs of the least amongst us first, which is a major pillar of the Progressive Liberal Party. We as a country are blessed to have an honorable man, such as our Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Davis, to lead this Bahamas in such a time as this. Members in this House of Assembly, the new day continues, and we look forward to brighter days ahead under the PLP government. Mr. Deputy, and I'll turn my attention to the Automatic Exchange of Information Amendment Bill. I won't be long, but this bill is what it says it is. The exchange of information automatically without interference. The honorable member, my colleague, Mr. Jomo Campbell, the member for Centerville, did a fantastic job in opening the debate, explaining the laws and the reason for which this administration saw fit to amend the bill in this honorable House. As mentioned, the Bahamas joined the OECD Inclusive Framework on Base Erosion and Profit Shifting, or BEPS, in December 2017. At this time, we made a commitment to implement 4 minimum standards, which are, number 1, the harmful tax practices, number 2, the 3D abuse, number 3, country by country reporting, and 4, dispute resolution. The collection and storing of this information and data by this agreement required to be done electronically with minimal interference. The Forum on Harmful Tax Practices, or FHTP, was mandated to conduct compliance reviews to ensure that the requirements are implemented effectively and to ensure a degree of equity between the no or only nominal tax jurisdictions, as well as with the jurisdictions offering preferential regimes. Mr. Deputy, the various international groupings and organizations have labeled the Bahamas as a no or non-tax jurisdiction. In April 2022, the FHTP determined in its report that, and I quote, the Bahamas undertook actions and reported back to the FHTP on its progress in relation to the recommendations for improvement made in November 2021 meeting. The Bahamas finalized the statistics for the year 2019 and provided provisional statistics for the year 2020. The Bahamas provided additional information on monitoring and compliance mechanism, which is still in the process of being developed. In this respect, 2 recommendations were removed, end quote. Mr. Deputy, obviously, there appears to be a case of blind Bartimaeus, but we in this administration forge on. This administration supports the amendments, supports the bills. We are of the view that we are compliant and have made every effort to make the changes emanating from the recommendations put forth. This government is on record as being compliant, as we have made changes to the laws of the Bahamas to ensure that compliance. Further, Mr. Deputy, in 2021, upon coming to office, we were confronted with an issue, a software-related issue, which was completely inadequate and didn't meet the basic fundamental business or reporting requirements. And I suspect that was a result, or the reports as a result of this software solution that was forced on the Bahamian people and the government at large. But in an effort to address the recommendations made in 2021 by the FHTP, the Ministry of Finance and the Legal and Regulatory Unit conducted and continues to conduct a review of the assessment of the entities that had submitted their returns in the Department of Inland Revenue using the Revenue Management System, or the RMS. In our view, the RMS was extended to receive substantial activity requirements, returns submitted by the entities in compliance with CESRA, but was unable to handle the load of the substantial activities requirements reporting on the Department of Inland Revenue's usage. Hence, our results today. Mr. Deputy, the senior officers within the ministry expressed their concerns about the portal, expressed their concerns about the software to the then seniors and supervisors within the Ministry of Finance. For members' information, and for information to the general public, it must be noted that the software solution does not have the features and analytical tool that would automatically provide the necessary statistics to the FHTP and EU reporting. The RMS also lacks the capability to generate reports for spontaneous exchange of substantial activities requirements to our partner jurisdiction. However, simply put, Mr. Deputy, the RMS did not cut the mustard respective to this reporting requirement. And it was more like putting a square peg in a round hole. It is my understanding that there was no consultation when forming the requirements for the software solution. I'm not talking about this administration, Mr. Deputy. Prior, there was no consultation when forming the requirements for the software solution. Only the senior expert and a former senior official sat down together in Starbucks and came up with a design, and I think so, and the flawed solution which we have. Mr. Deputy, in good conscience, I won't. Maybe I want to strike that from the record. Mr. Deputy, in good conscience, I said it won't be long. I want to be consistent with my former profession. Okay. In good conscience, Mr. Deputy, this administration could not leave the state of affairs as is and was more concerned about the future and the to-be solution. The Ministry of Finance is in the process of addressing these issues to ensure that the software solution has the essential tools and the ability to generate the reports for the spontaneous exchange of information to our partners of the jurisdiction in accordance with our agreement. Mr. Deputy, this administration sprung into action and did what was necessary to mitigate and correct the flaws of the software we made in place and commenced a full-scale procurement exercise. Full scale. The Ministry of Finance has been in dialogue with several software solutions providers to provide a replacement solution for the substance reporting and spontaneous exchange of information portal. One provider is in the early stages of building out their software solution, which will substantially extend the time needed in order for us to do what is necessary. So therefore, that particular provider was not taken into consideration. After consultation with the providers, we narrowed down our discussions to two vendors, Mr. Deputy. The proposals were considered to be more appropriate for the Bahamas needs at this particular time. Additionally, the data that was stored or that will be stored or was proposed to be stored in the cloud was not viable, as we didn't want to infringe on any of the data protection laws within country. Mr. Deputy, the vendor that is currently being used for this Bahamas automatic exchange of information reporting obligation, i.e. FATCA, CRS, and CBC reporting, has agreed to provide services tailored to the Bahamas substance reporting needs as an extension of the platform that is currently being used by the government of the Bahamas. This is the new group, the new proposal. The proposal under consideration, which includes the cost for the economic substance reporting software, is technically sound. It wasn't done in silo, Mr. Deputy, and the cost for this particular solution was very feasible. But most importantly, the data and the cloud storage of this particular data would be housed and managed through a local service provider within country. Mr. Deputy, we have identified much challenges, but this administration is up to the challenge, and we will do what we must to make it right. With that being said, being in Grantstown supports. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Act 2016. As many. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Before I begin, Mr. Deputy, before I begin my contribution, I would like to draw the public's attention to an important health forum by the Women's Association of the Free National Movement happening this Saturday. They are raising, like other groups, awareness to the very challenging issue of breast cancer, and are also addressing other concerns that impact the physical and mental health of Bahamians. They have a very strong expert panel to address this issue, and we'd like members of the public to attend and benefit from remarks delivered by Dr. Mildred Hall Watson, Dr. Gemma Roll, Dr. Sakara, who will be addressing the issue of uterine fibroids, and Dr. Inia Theophilus, who will address the issue of mental health. Furthermore, Mr. Deputy, I would like to extend condolences to a number of families and to families across the Bahamas who have lost loved ones during this very challenging period. It is with great sadness that we extend condolence to the family of MCM Nesbitt Higgins, who unfortunately passed away and has left a deep hole in the lives of many Bahamians, but in particular his family. And we say to his wife and children how much we miss him, love him, but how much we stand with you. And also to the family of George Capron, who passed away, an outstanding Bahamian, a man of courage. We extend condolences to his family, and just over the last day or so, the passing of Levant Miller. We say to his family that you are in our prayers. And members of the Grand Bahama community also mourn, and we join with them in mourning the loss of Richard Stewart, Dwight Roxbury, Alice Meadows Sands, dear close friend of my family, Mildred Blatch, Joycelyn Roll, and Bernard Ballou. May their souls rest in peace. Mr. Deputy, we are here to debate a piece of legislation that is intended to tweak the administrative regime surrounding the financial services pillar of our economy. This government, like previous governments, have battled how do we fix the legislative regime that affects an important dimension of our national economy. No doubt this bill is a response to the blacklisting by the EU, which came as a result of this government's pattern of behavior. Late again, efforts to consult the industry was, in fact, lackluster at best. They failed to grasp the current state of play when they arrived, and to devise effective proactive solutions to head off this blacklisting. They will not be able to explain away this dereliction of duty. No doubt, it is the rush to catch up on the ongoing work that was left in place by the last administration and dropped by this current government, as their focus and attention has not been on the very serious domestic matters that we face as a country. And while we appreciate being plugged into the international community and the need to address issues globally, even in their ranks, they seem to now acknowledge that they fly too often, delegations larger than necessary, some persons who travel not appropriate for the discussions that are being engaged in. While at home, we face very serious crises that require focused attention. It is sad to note that after the blacklisting, 1 year later, this government, just only, I think yesterday, announced its choice for EU ambassador, a post created by the FNM to ensure that the jurisdiction would always have its pulse on the EU and OECD actions and direction. It is worrisome that we hear, even today, attempts to deflect on what they should have done to head off or reduce the possibility of blacklisting. Inasmuch as it affects our financial services industry and foreign policy consideration, it is important that this administration consistently consults with local stakeholders and take note of work that had been done before. After all, the people have already pronounced the verdict on our administration. It didn't mean that they have rejected all policies and efforts made prior to us demitting office. They have been late again in consultation. It is necessary for us to take this opportunity when addressing these issues to help the public understand the relevance of it. And so for a brief moment, Mr. Deputy, I wish to restate some of the points raised earlier about the automatic exchange of information. This particular amendment is designed to make the system more efficient in the execution of exchanging important information. It is an agreement that deals with the exchange of information between countries without those partner countries having to request that information. And it exists to reduce global tax evasion. By way of background, Mr. Deputy, I note and I second the assertion by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development that cooperation between tax administrations is critical in the fight against tax evasion and protecting the integrity of tax systems. It is unfortunate that this organization, like a number of others from the more developed countries, do not take the same medicine that they wish to administer to us. The global economy has decided that a key aspect of that cooperation is exchange of information. As we consider the amendment today the government has brought, it would be good to recall the brief history of the automatic exchange of information. In 2010, the United States of America enacted the Foreign Account Tax Compliant Act. And these provisions are aimed at reducing tax evasion of American citizens and entities. In particular, the acronym FACTA, which captures the point that I just raised, is aimed at detecting U.S. taxpayers who use accounts with offshore financial institutions to conceal income and assets from the Internal Revenue Service. The substantive FACTA requirements for financial institutions were, in the main, adopted on the 1st of July, 2014. Anticipating that many countries' domestic laws would otherwise prevent foreign financial institutions From fully complying with FACTA, G20 countries adopted the automatic exchange of information as the new global common reporting standard for automatic exchange of tax information between multiple countries. As noted by the Securities Commission of the Bahamas, the common reporting standard both maximizes efficiency and reduces costs for financial institutions to share the requisite tax information. The standard provides for annual automatic exchange between governments of financial account information, including balances of accounts, interest, dividends, and sales from financial assets reported to the government by financial institutions. And of course, it covers accounts held by individuals and entities, including trusts and foundations. It sets out financial account information to be exchanged, the financial institutions that need to report the different types of accounts and taxpayers covered, as well as common due diligence procedures to be followed by financial institutions. On October 29, 2014, the Bahamas joined 50 other jurisdictions in signing a multilateral competent authority agreement to automatically exchange information based on Article 6 of the Multilateral Convention. This agreement, Mr. Deputy, specifies the details of what information would be exchanged and when and how it is set out in the document. Last week, OECD Secretary General Matthias Cormann suggested that the common reporting standards has been very successful in the fight against international tax evasion. He reported that in 2021, over 100 jurisdictions exchanged information on 111 million financial accounts, covering total assets of 11 trillion euros, roughly 10.8 trillion US dollars. Mr. Deputy, let me fast forward simply to make the point that the Bahamas has, over both administrations, sought to head off any possibility of us being put on any list as a harmful tax jurisdiction. We have been an honest broker in this environment, and we believe many developing states like the Bahamas have been disadvantaged by the unfair playing field that has been established by far more powerful countries. So we have played ball, understanding how vulnerable our financial services sector is, but we have also been resolute in lending our voice to the international chorus of countries that do not appreciate the unfair manner in which we have been dealt with. We have, by and large, sought to be compliant and to assist in protecting the global financial system from misuse. Having said that, I certainly stand by the assertion that any attempts by this administration to deflect on what they did not execute in a timely fashion is not justified. Let me also say, Mr. Deputy, that we understand this amendment to empower the Minister of Finance to, through delegated powers, to empower a number of agencies to function as a designated officer or designated supervisory authorities. And so several of them that were listed earlier have the ability now to better track, supervise those registrants under each of their remit, and also to share information to speed up the process or to increase efficiency. It is important, we believe, that now that the government is moving from one agency, pretty much the Ministry of Finance, to multiple agencies, that we guard against any abuse of that system, and that we make sure that there is oversight, that no one regulatory body or institution is acting unilaterally ultra-virus of what is intended. It's intended, my understanding, to speed up the process, to make sure we are more efficient, but not that an agency working with a corresponding agency in another country all of a sudden is sharing things unbeknown to the Ministry of Finance and to the government that we may fundamentally be in disagreement with. And so it is important to hear in the wrap-up how this administration intends to guard against that. What is also useful and is to look at how other countries have thus far been utilizing this disagreement. And what we have seen by the Swiss is the Swiss have been quite busy sharing many of the data on persons who are in fact registered in their jurisdiction. So they have shared, I believe, with some 101 countries, information on nationals from other countries who are depositing funds in their jurisdiction. We would like to ask the government if in the wrap-up it is in a position to say whether or not we have received information from Switzerland on Bahamian nationals who have funds deposited in Swiss accounts. And are there any members of the government or persons in the Parliament of the Bahamas who are included among those persons who have deposited funds? And what is the understanding and what is the understanding of the circumstances under which those funds have been deposited? And so we would also, given the limited time, let me just say we would also ask the government to be vigilant as we look to continue to create a wonderful environment, regulatory environment for cryptocurrency and other digital assets to thrive. The government should nevertheless pay attention to the evolving regulatory regime internationally that governs digital asset, and to make sure the Bahamas maintains its position as a leader in the international community regulating digital assets. Let me say, Mr. Deputy, the reason we are having this debate on this amendment, aside from the fact that the government does not have a robust legislative agenda, that it is continually on a series of breaks. We wouldn't say unnecessary because we don't know what all the issues are that the government is facing. But we are deeply concerned about the irregularity, the inconsistency of the parliamentary agenda. But we are especially concerned about the second Wednesday that this government continues to duck in order to answer questions raised by the opposition. And some of my colleagues will put those questions on the record. But the government continues to duck the tough issues. They came, engaged in communications with a view of a one-way communication with the Bahamian people because they wish not to be challenged on important ill-advised steps that they have taken in governance. So we're debating an amendment that's important that we support. However, what is true is that this amendment also will contribute to addressing the unfortunate situation we find ourselves in part, because of this government late again agenda. Let me comment on several things that are of great concern to us. I heard one of the speakers before me, Mr. Deputy, talk about a lack of consultation. This New Day government is the last administration that should engage in any discussion about consultation. During our time in government, the present Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister of Education, waxed eloquent with respect to lack of consultation. Again, we just heard it again today on the software that was chosen. The New Day government is the poster child for lack of consultation. Ask the retailers in the food sector in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Ask the small food stores throughout Family Islands and in Marco City and in West Grand Bahama and in Bimini. Were they consulted by the New Day government? I mean, did they even talk to the member of parliament for the area about how these decisions would affect them? Did they talk to the pharmaceuticals? Well, we know the answer to that. The government has admitted that it did not consult on the impact of their decision on these businesses. This government has made business decisions that can potentially close dozens and dozens, possibly hundreds of Bahamian businesses throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. They failed to determine the facts on how these businesses would be impacted by their decision. We understand why. They were under such serious pressure over the ill-advised decision around BPL, the failure to impact the inflationary pressures that plague our people, that they wanted to come once again with a populist statement, an address, as they reflected on their 1 year. And they then came with candies. Candies that taste good upon the initial consumption but causes cavities later. That's this government. That's this government. That's this government. That's this government. So we want to talk about compassionate and revolutionary. No, how about the candy man? They have failed to consult with the various government aides. Think about this. The government has just made some decisions that impact the bread basket items, Mr. Deputy, without even talking with the intersectorial committee in government that determines what goes into the bread basket mix. The consultation is not even internal. And so again, this government should not be talking about consultation. They are not about that business. The government can quite easily take VAT of all of the additional items they wish to put in the price control mix. Just take VAT of it. They've proven over and over that the VAT they said they couldn't adjust, they adjusted it when they moved from $300 to $400 as the exemption for those persons who were affected by the BPL hike. So they know they can always adjust it. They just adjust it when it's convenient for them. They don't care if it's inconvenient for the Bahamian people. And so, again, why not just remove VAT, not just of the bread basket item, but also of the new mix of items that price control now covers. This government failed to conduct studies. You're making a life-changing decision for businesses and consumers and don't even bother to conduct a study to determine what the potential impact is. In much the same way, they have not conducted studies to determine some of the other decisions they have made and how it will affect the consumer or businesses later on. So this government gets to make mistakes and then challenge the business community to bear the responsibility, to shoulder the responsibility of paying for the mistakes. That's why people have problems with policymakers in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We get to go ahead and make the mistakes, but then we want to tax some other folks in order to pay for it. Well, the public clearly sees through this. That's why the government, this government they dance well. And the chief dance that they know is not the quadrille, not the heel and toe, it's the moonwalk. They moonwalk on a regular basis back from decisions made when the pressure get hot. And right now the pressure tall on these roads. It's tall. And so again, the government needs to conduct studies in advance of the decisions that they make. Thirdly, when in government, we implemented a massive food program that sought to deal with the issue of food insecurity among Bahamians. And tens of thousands of Bahamians benefited from the food program. But when this government came to power, instead of improving upon the food program, in fact, we found dignified ways to try and distribute it. We accepted any criticism when it came, and we then pivoted to try and address the food insecurity of our people. This government came and virtually canceled it. People, well, if they didn't cancel it, they sure didn't tell people where they could go to get help. And the truth is, I live in Grand Bahama, like the member for West Grand Bahama, and it is difficult to get the assistance because of the way in which we distribute money to the Family Island in tranches every quarter. And so, instead, what did this government do? This government drip-fed this public with salacious details, sullying the names of individuals, of NGOs and church organizations, rather than deal with the issue of food security. Meanwhile, this government flush. They got money. Listen, this government, there isn't a function that they can't seem to find money for in order to have a cocktail party in the beginning and a reception at the end. This is a ceremonial government. Ceremonial, love to have ceremony. Most of the members on the government side, it's hard for them to go to work during a ceremony. Hard to go to work because they're the cocktail party or reception. And so, yeah, except I wasn't eating your food, eh? I was too concerned with them folks who ain't have nothing to eat. And so here we are. You failed to act in a timely fashion. We left in place a pathway to deal with the issue of the potential of blacklisting, but you did not follow it. Did not follow it. So consider this. The government puts out a fiscal strategy report, does not follow the very report they put in print. In fact, when the report was released, not hardly any of the ministers in here even saw it before it was released. So if you were responsible for state-owned enterprises and we asked you about it, you didn't know? Because they didn't have the respect to actually let you see the report. It was released, and it was released online, not even in here as required by law. That impacts our credibility. And Moody has indicated that because this government says one thing in print and does something else in actuality, they could not take your predictions about what steps you're going to take seriously. What is also true about this administration that affects our credibility is that we know we are in tough times, but this government is unable to tighten its belt. Not even symbolically, with that multi-million-dollar PR machinery, you don't think a few more persons could have gone in the economy and take a picture of that instead of private airlines and first class? Living large at the people's expense, people having difficulty, have to skip meals. They have to skip meals while they watch an entourage skip into first class and business class and are selfieing themselves, showing off on the people's dime. I would think that at least the PR consultants would say, this is not a good picture. The optics of this doesn't look good. People can't eat, they have to skip meals, and I in first class selfie. On what basis? Not taking the picture at a table, negotiating with world leaders about transforming the lives of Bahamian, but I in first class. This me now. And so our downgrade is in part a result of failure of international agencies and creditors to take our words seriously. The government has now raised fuel charge from 10.5 cents, and it's going to go up to almost 28 cents. Almost 28 cents on the backs of Bahamians. The most vulnerable Bahamians, their electricity bill will be raised by at least 35%. The middle-class Bahamians will have a hit of somewhere close to 100% increase. There is overall a 163% increase in fuel charge. I dare the Prime Minister and the Minister of Works to come in this house and stand on their feet and say they did not know, that they were not briefed on the need to early execute the trades, maintain the hedge that we had in place, so that we could maintain a fuel charge of somewhere around 10.5 or 11 cents instead of what we have to go to now. They cannot say it because I'm sure enough correspondence is out there to show that they received the information, that a cabinet paper was prepared to go to the Dr. Minnis and the cabinet in the event that we had been returned to government. And so I'm saying we have the proof that they knew. So to say anything otherwise is patently false. The correspondence exists. Let them stand in this place on their feet and say they did not know.
Honorable member.
But yet they tax me. Just 1 minute. I'm wrapping up now, sir. Thank you very much. And listen, unemployment is extremely high. We applaud the Department of Labor. Labor on the blocks is wonderful, but let's learn from all that has been done before. Let's find a dignified way to put our people in front of employers rather than miles and miles in the sun, etc. We can improve on that. Again, it's always a good thing to create opportunities, but we could do it better. And of course, let me say this. Women have been on the front, let's be real. Women have been on the front line fighting to end domestic violence, fighting to end violence in general against women, children, and men. Women have been on the front line, petitioning governments, and we have enacted legislation to make sure that they can get the requisite support to take care of their children. It is really a tragedy to have members of the government permit women organizations to be savaged as if they are not already out there on the front line. And I challenge my sisters, my brothers in Parliament to speak out against any member of the government challenging, savaging women. So we are blaming the victims. Here are the women who are fighting, and we're saying they ain't doing nothing about remediating the state of affairs that we find ourselves in. And so I challenge this government to come clean, come to this Parliament, do the work that you have been sent here to do, discontinue this runaway spending. It is costing us. Discontinue not making the decisions that need to be made now. You have NIB that you're facing. Let's deal with the situation. You have many serious issues.
Are you wrapping up?
Issues. My last statement, I know it hurts, member for West End and Bimini. Many serious issues that we have to address, and we challenge you to do the right thing and address them in a timely basis. Marco City supports the amendment, but do not support the manner in which the government is addressing our financial situation in these inflationary times.
Thank you, honorable member. As many. The chair recognized the honorable member for Fox Hill.
To debunk this notion, I saw one of his former colleagues enthusiastically on video this morning going on about how the runaway spending and how things are running behind and all the rest of the year. The finance people assure me the revenues are up and the spending is down. Revenues are up and spending down. I say it again, revenues are up and spending down.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognized the honorable member for Marco City.
But can I just ask the member for Fox Hill if he would be able to lay those documents where the finance people have indicated that, so we can examine them, because that's not our understanding of what's going on. If he can lay them.
Thank you, honorable member. Yes.
Just one correction made, just a response to the member from Marco.
Members.
Just response to the member of the Marco City reference to the advocates, the women being attacked by and sitting idly and not defending. That is not true, Mr. Deputy. An apology was made. Women have been in the forefront of issues concerning them. They've been working and liaising with the government, working with the Ministry of Social Services, working with the Attorney General's office. Any error made in statement has been corrected and an apology made.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
West End and Bimini, it is our understanding that statements coming out of the office of the Prime Minister can only leave the office of the Prime Minister if sanctioned by the policymakers. And so again, I would like to know whether or not the statements were sanctioned.
The chair recognizes the honourable member
I think
for
that your
West
experience in government and the gentleman sitting next to you will advise that oftentimes things happen and you are made aware subsequently. And the same happened in this case, and an apology has been made. There are many.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fort Charlotte.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the honourable member of Centerville framed the debate as a housekeeping matter. In other words, the honourable member for Centerville anticipated, and I must confess, Mr. Deputy, I too anticipated that this debate would not have condescended or been, I never anticipated there would have been any controversy. The honourable member for Marco City used the words, very emotive words, dereliction of duty, lack of focus and lack of attention, fly too often, serious crisis at home, and late again. What the honourable, we intended, Mr. Deputy, to fly high. Yes. But since the honourable member want to fly low, the honourable member ought to have disclosed that the bill, the act, which was passed in 2017, is based on reciprocity. But he must know that the Bahamas has no income tax and therefore could not engage in reciprocity. It means that it is only one way. The honourable member knows that there are issues of data protection. Should not the member have disclosed that? But what I find most extraordinary, Mr. Deputy, is that more than 6 months before the general election, the European Union notified the government. The European Union explained its concern well before the general election. And the record will disclose, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the lack of adequate response. Lack of responsibility. In fact, lack of response. In fact, I'm not yielding. It's just a point of order. What is the point of order? I'm not yielding. What is the point of order? But
is there a point of order?
He hasn't spoken. Okay, he has to state why he's interrupting me.
Okay, the members, the chair recognizes the member for East Grand Bahama. You said this is a point of order, not an opinion, right?
Thank you very much,
okay.
Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, the point of order is the member is misleading this House. The matter upon which he speaks about, the computer program or the computer software system that was notified by the European Union. It was notified by the European Union to the previous F&M administration. The F&M administration did their due diligence. The F&M administration did their processing in terms of procurement. The F&M administration also approved the upgrades to the software system prior to leaving office. Once we left office, the same advisors also notified the Progressive Liberal Party government. That was done shortly after election. And nothing was done.
They now come about and talk about a problem with the software system, and we are now going to solve the problem with the software system. They were advised of this from November of last year. It has taken them a year to now come around. And that is precisely what the leader of the opposition was speaking about in terms of the dereliction of duty.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bain and Grandstown.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. According to my records, Mr. Deputy, I just wanted to make a point of clarity. But according to my records, it indicated that there was indication that the Ministry of Finance was informed of the challenges in 2019. And I state concerns about the portal, in addition to other issues in relation to this matter. 2019 were brought to the attention of the former head of the LRAU at the time, but no resolution was taken. 2019, Mr. Deputy, no resolution was taken.
Thank you, honorable member. Members, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Fort Charlotte.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the honorable member of East Grand Bahama failed to disclose that in this peril, a system was attempted. No software, couldn't work. Then they went to Inland Revenue and sought to use a system which was not designed for purpose. It is this government. It is this Minister of Finance. It is this Prime Minister who is correcting the problem that you created. And we will disclose to Parliament the corrective measures that are being taken.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Is that we do not wish Parliament to be misled. The upgrades to the software system. And the software system, yes, and they are changes to the regulations, and there are changes to the recommendations. We also approved the upgrades to the software system prior to election. That's right. All they had to do was follow through with the upgrades. And if they had followed through with the upgrades in time, because that's the key. The key is there was an assessment that was coming in March of 2022. There was an assessment. So you had sufficient time to put in place the upgrades to be able to meet the assessment that was coming in March of 2022. They even got an extension to September, and they still did not meet the requirements up to September, and that is why we were blacklisted.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fort Charlotte.
Mr. Deputy, with all of the earnestness of the honorable member for East Grand Bahama, he has conceded the point I'm making. He's talking about upgrades, but the system was not fit for purpose. How can you upgrade if it's not fit for purpose? And that's the folly. And that is indeed the folly. That is indeed the folly. But, Mr. Deputy, the point that I am making of flying high rather than flying low. Because on the issue of listing by the European Union, the FATF, and all of those ad hoc bodies under the European Union is that this has been a long-standing issue. It was under the leadership of Hubert Alexander Ingram in 2000 when we were listed by 4 different agencies. And a compendium of legislation was rushed through this parliament. And we have had a succession of listings, under every administration since then. In fact, Mr. Deputy, the reason why the honorable member of Centerville framed this as housekeeping is because in the continuous governance of our country, we are dealing with an ongoing challenge. And the nature of this ongoing challenge requires bipartisanship. And let me tell you what it means to fly high. Under the leadership of Hubert Minnis, the same thing happened. Listing several downgrades. And I want to make this very personal, because I'm not talking about a distant observation. As a former Attorney General, when we came into office in 2002, one of the first things I had to do as Attorney General was deal with the Bahamas being put on a monitoring list. And it took us years, almost 3 years, to have the Bahamas removed. So I understood, Mr. Deputy, that this isn't a partisan matter. When the honorable member for Kalani was Prime Minister, and the Bahamas was listed again, I called the honorable minister, Prime Minister at that time. I also contacted the Minister of Finance, Mr. Turnquest.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
The member for Fort Charlotte is seeking to give the impression that he used himself as. Let me finish the point. Let me finish.
Member.
May I finish the point?
Members. Yeah.
You are that's transparent.
Yeah. Members, I suggest you.
So, Mr. Deputy, the member for Fort Charlotte was not in this chamber over the last 4.5 years. We sat in this chamber. May I finish the point? We sat in this chamber and listened to members opposite after the blacklisting were very, very critical. So there was no bipartisan approach. There was no bipartisan approach on this. So he can't sell that. He cannot sell that.
Members.
He was not here. His other members were here, and they were not as gracious as he was in his private conversation with the member for Kalani. So he is seeking to give the impression that the then PLP in opposition was bipartisan. They were not. So he should kill that story immediately.
Yeah, okay, members, yeah, okay. Okay, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
I was here. And I recall very vividly.
Members.
Very vividly, the pointing of the fingers at us because of the impending blacklisting that they had. And yes, there was bipartisanship. Because I was the Attorney General, then Attorney General and I, and a number of my team members, we sat together. Mr. Alfred Sears was a part of that. He was not in Parliament, but he was part of that, along with Alison Gibson and others who had gone through the exercise. And that's what he's referring to. And let me just say this further. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, at the end of it all, yes, the bipartisanship fell down because they did not follow through with promises made to our side. As a result of that, in one instance, this economy lost near $70 million because of the compendium legislation that was passed at December. Yep. Right? Now, see, you wouldn't know because you weren't included in these things. You were a stranger. Marco said you were a stranger to what was going on. I didn't know that. Now, let's talk that. You were a stranger. Remember, Kalani did not include you, nor did the Attorney General. And as a result of that,
Marco City, can you address your question to the chair? Yes, sir.
I'd like
the chair recognized the honorable member for Marco City.
Yeah. Again, I'm glad that the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador indicate that the bipartisanship breakdown, because what we remember is your public statement that was critical of the FNM.
Okay. Members. Okay.
He is recognized. Yeah.
Okay.
Member for Fort Charlotte. Member for Fort Charlotte. You are not the deputy. The point I'm making.
Address
Mr. Deputy.
To the chair.
Mr. Deputy, I referred to comments in the public domain by the then PLP opposition that criticized the FNM administration and blamed us for the blacklisting. That's the point I'm making.
Okay, members, let us stay focused so we could get this debate over with. I think we're getting a bit sidetracked. So the chair recognized the honorable member for Fort Charlotte.
Mr. Deputy, thank you so much for your protection. Mr. Deputy, as part of the group working with the then leader of the opposition, I reach out to the Minister of Finance and I reach out to the Prime Minister, and I subsequently issued a release. No, I was not in Parliament, but I issued a release and I will lay this release as a citizen. That's the highest office one can hold, as a citizen. And I wish, Mr. Deputy, with your permission, sir, to read the release that I issued after I had spoken, and I have a very long response from the Minister of Finance, Mr. Turnquest, and thanking me for my intervention. And this is the release that was dated February 14, 20. It was made public? No, it's a WhatsApp. But if it is challenged, I will read it into the record. But I'm going to read the release that was released to the public. And this is what it says, and I will read it verbatim.
What date?
And it's February 14th, 2019. 2019.
But December 28th. December 2018.
The Bahamian government seems to have been caught by surprise by the punitive action taken by the European Commission against the Bahamas on Wednesday, February 13th, 2019, alleging that the Bahamas has 7 strategic deficiencies in its AML CFT regime based on Article 9 of the European Directive 2015, number 849. I caution the Prime Minister and the Attorney General and Minister of Finance and the Minister of Financial Services, Trade and Industry against rushing off to Brussels in a panic to make ill-considered appeasements and secret agreements. The Cabinet of the Bahamas should assess the nature of this problem, weigh policy options, geostrategic factors, and lay out to the Bahamian people a rational policy response, informed by empirical data and the best technical advice, detailing how the government will secure the short, medium, and long-term national interests of the Bahamas with respect to the moving goalposts by the European union relating to the Bahamas' AML CFT regime and tax policies. As the former Attorney General who led the team that succeeded in getting Bahamas removed from the monitoring list of the FATF in 2005, I appreciate that this matter is complex. Short-term panic-driven acts of appeasement by the government will not produce a permanent resolution. The very foundation of the financial services sector, its organizing assumption since its construction, is being challenged. Understaffed from the time it was constructed under Stafford Sands. In this context, I'm looking at everybody. In this context, I propose that the government consider the following recommendations, trying to be positive. Immediate steps. The government should immediately address the 7 deficiencies identified by the European Union in order to remove any pretext or basis for any further hostile actions being taken against the Bahamas. The following steps should be taken. A, engage advisory service team of local and international multidisciplinary group, including Mr. Calvin Wilson, immediate past executive director of CFATF. Mr. Wilson has been engaged with the removal of the Bahamas from the various negative listing from 2000. B, form an advisory policy group comprising former prime ministers, attorney generals, ministers of investment, trade, and financial services, heads of regulatory agency, and representatives from the financial services advisory representative bodies to review the current threat, assess the likelihood for further punitive measures, share knowledge and contacts, and advise appropriate response based on consideration of proportionality, competitive advantage, niche opportunities, and international obligations. And C, coordinate collaboration amongst the various regulatory agencies in the financial services sector to prepare a technical brief for the Cabinet's review and determination. Then, Mr. Deputy, I went on to medium-term measures. Simultaneously, I proposed that the following measures with bipartisan political consensus be considered and undertaken to avoid further external threats and punitive measures by ad hoc bodies against the Bahamas financial services sector, and while the Bahamas repositions its financial services sector to be more competitive in a rapidly changing global environment. And those, 1, the Bahamas should, with the support of CARICOM, initiate and lead an international lobby for the convening of a global forum calling for the formation of a United Nations treaty to cover issues of money laundering, terrorist financing, and unfair tax competition. Have we forgotten the pivotal role the Bahamas played through the Bahamas diplomat George Stewart under the Pindling administration in lobbying for the drafting and implementation of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea? The Attorney Generals of the Caribbean and CFATF in 2003, while I serve as chairman of CFAT, passed a resolution calling for the convening of a global forum to put anti-money laundering under a United Nations treaty. Prime Minister Mayor Motley, who was then Attorney General of Barbados, and I worked very closely in getting this resolution passed. The Christie Cabinet in 2004 authorized Senator Mitchell as Minister of Foreign Affairs to promote the convening of a global forum on anti-money laundering during the United Nations General Assembly. In this regard, Barbados joined the Bahamas in these efforts. It may be useful to work closely with Prime Minister Mayor Motley to lead this campaign with the Bahamas. From my recollection, certain members of the OECD, such as Canada and South Africa, were very helpful to the Bahamas during this period. And I'm happy to say that Prime Minister Philip Brave Davis, just 2 weeks ago, made that same call in his address in the General Assembly of the United Nations. 3, as the leading financial services center, the Bahamas, as the leading financial center, should host an international forum on, and I quote, the new paradigm for anti-money laundering, anti-terrorist financing, and global tax issues, a call for global treaty. Invitation should be extended to all international financial centers, leading scholars, NGOs, as well as multilateral organizations. 3, examine the feasibility of mounting a legal challenge in concert with CARICOM in the International Court of Justice at The Hague against the measures mounted by the European Union against the Bahamas, a non-member of the EU and a competitor in financial services to European and American onshore financial centers. Under customary international law, it is illegal for a state or group of states to engage in actions of retortion, retaliation, reprisals, intervention, or coercion to control smaller states who are members of the United Nations to force a change in their internal or foreign policy. This principle is clearly stated in the Declaration of Principles of International Law concerning friendly relations adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1970, which provides, and I quote, no state may use or encourage the use of economic, political, or other type of measures to coerce another state in order to obtain from it the subordination of the exercise of its sovereign rights and to secure from it advantages of any kind, end quote. Further, the United Nations Charter at Article 2, subsection 2 declares, and I quote, all member states shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations, end quote. Save and except for secret agreements between the Bahamas and the European Union, the European Commission would lack any legal or juridical basis to take punitive measures against the Bahamas. Sir Lyndon Pindling warned us, if we are not prepared to fight for our sovereignty, then we don't deserve to have it. 4, the Bahamas should make evidence-based decision-making in this area. In the past, under successive government, its decisions relating to the deployment of resources, adjustment of regulatory practices, and the enactment of legislative measures have, in every instance, been frantic responses to hostile external threats of negative listing by either the U.S. Treasury Department, the FATF, Financial Stability Forum, the OECD, etc. To shift policy decision-making to a more rational basis in the interest of peace, order, and good governance of the Bahamas. And then I propose, A, that we engage the University of the Bahamas to conduct a research project by a multidisciplinary team of scholars to review the policy measures undertaken by the government in the area of financial services, the nature of the external environment, and the growing protectionism of offshore financial centers in OECD member countries, the niche opportunities for the future role of offshore financial centers in a rapidly changing global economy, and to produce findings and recommendations to guide public policy formation in this anti-money laundering and terrorist financing area. B, establish a permanent financial services institute at the University of the Bahamas as a regional center of excellence funded by the government, private sector, and multilateral funding agencies to review, assess, identify niche opportunities, areas of innovation and product development, and make policy recommendations to the government to ensure the sustainability of financial centers such as the Bahamas. And 5, streamline the current uneven regulatory performance in the financial services sector. The government should create a supra-regulatory agency, and indeed, this is one of the objectives, is to have the powers which are exercised now by the Ministry of Finance repose in the 4 regulatory bodies, that is the Central Bank, the Securities Commission, the Insurance, and also the Gaming Regulator. Increase Bahamian government representation on all multilateral bodies dealing with financial services to build influence and ensure an advanced warning system of any potential threat to the Bahamas, and deploy professional Bahamians on the professional staff of international multilateral bodies of which the Bahamas is a member, in order to extend. And colleagues would have seen the government has deployed representatives, envoys, and all of the various bodies of which the Bahamas is a member, and even deploying Bahamian technical officers to CARICOM, to the United Nations and other bodies. Finally, the government should use this crisis as an opportunity to dismantle the ring fencing of foreign direct investment in the Bahamas, based on the Stafford-Sands model's assumptions that foreign direct investment is the sole basis for national development. Based on that assumption, incentives, crown land, exemptions from taxes, and subsidies are given almost exclusively to foreign investors, while Bahamian investors, entrepreneurs, have restricted access to comparative venture capital and denied equal consideration for incentives. So, Mr. Deputy, I will table this because what we intended to do, that is our team in Parliament and those of us outside of Parliament, was to bring our collective experience to the government. Our party was not in government, but we recognize that there's only one country, there's only one nation state, and we've tried to bring our collective experience to inform the government. We could have taken pot shots at your inexperience and so on, but we didn't do that. And this is why the honorable member for Centerville, he said housekeeping. In other words, this is routine. Let us now, outside of the heat of debate, sit down and see how we can devise a rational strategy so that we can move the Commonwealth of the Bahamas forward. Mr. Deputy, we intended to fly high, and we hope that in the summation, we will be, because I think every speaker supports the bill, but if you were to follow the rhetoric, you would have thought that there was a divergence. But let us fly high in the interests of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Esme. Order that the documents be brought up. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Yes. One will just read. So thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. I would not belabor this point, and I will lay this document. Yes.
Order that the documents to lie on the table. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Yes, I would not belabor the point, and I will lay this document the point made earlier with reference to the member not being in Parliament was simply to make the point that those members who were in Parliament were critical of our administration. I'm going to read it in the record just so that you're aware. This is dated January 21st, 2019, and I will lay the document. Opposition leader. Opposition leader Philip Brave Davis recently warned the FNM government to cease from being reactionary in their dealings.
The chair recognizes the honourable member. One minute.
When he spoke to this debate, he's not abusing the opportunity.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Spoke twice. Grandstown spoke twice.
No.
Thank you,
This is where it gets out of control when the leader of government business wants to run the House.
Thank you, honourable member.
Sorry, Mr. Deputy, I stood on a point of order because I felt as if the House was being misled about the commitment of the then opposition to approach this issue in a bipartisan way. In order to prove my point of order, I need to at least show where members who were present in the House did in fact.
Fly high.
Opposition leader Philip Brave Davis recently warned the FNM government to cease from being reactionary in their dealings with the European Union crisis, advising them that their failure to be honest and transparent will result in the country being blacklisted again. Davis said, "It is in the best interest of the Bahamas for the government to learn on how to be truthful and open in their handling of this situation." So, I'll just lay this in response to what was tabled by the member for Fort Charlotte.
Thank you, honourable member. The chair recognizes the honourable member for East Grand Bahama.
Election.
Oh.
We'll go until 1 o'clock and then break at 1.
Huh? Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, it is again a privilege to be able to stand in this honorable House to represent the good people of the East Grand Bahama. I could start a tree if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So I don't get into
Mr. Deputy, so I'd like to move now for the suspension for lunch.
Is there a seconder?
At 3 o'clock this afternoon.
It's been moved and seconded that the business of the House be suspended to 3 p.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of the House stands suspended until 3 p.m.
All right.